All right, our next and our last speaker for this section, we're very lucky to have him here, is Richard Buckland. Richard Buckland is a celebrated and award-winning teacher and leading expert in cybersecurity, cybercrime, cyber terror, based in the School of Computer Science and Engineering, talking about fostering inspiring teachers and transformational learning. Please welcome Professor Richard Buckland.
Hello. Carrots and sticks. What keeps me awake is education, and specifically the question, what would education look like without marks, without scores, without ranking? A couple of years ago, I was while still a city person, helping on a farm round up some cattle. It was quite a large paddock, several hundred acres, and the cattle were a bit wild. I took some city friends out with me, and we spent all day trying to round up about 30 head of cattle and their calves. And we all formed lines and moved this way and that way, and they would, like sand through our fingers, escape every time. We'd think we'd have them cornered and try and move on, and a calf would run out, then the mother would follow, and everyone would go. We spent all day, and at the end of the day, we were exhausted, hot, sweaty and annoyed, and the cows were still happily distributed over the paddock. And that night I had dinner at a neighbour's place, a barbecue, and I told the neighbour, a real farmer, the troubles we were having and saying how hard it was to round up cattle when there were only 30 of them. And he laughed and laughed and said we were pretty hopeless. And he would come over the next day and help. And the next morning, he and his daughter came over on motorbikes, and he said, I want you to stand there. And when you see the cows, I want you to do this. That's all. And I want you to stand there. And when the cows come along this road and reach that point, I want you to wave your hat like this. And he said to me, I want you to be by that gate, but a bit further away. And when they go through the gate, after they've all gone through, can you step forward and close it? And the rest of you just sit down out of sight. And then he and his daughter drove over the hill. It's like a fish out of water. We could hear sounds in the distance, motorbikes mooing. And eventually the cows happily come trotting over the hill, a big mob of them, walk along. They move that way, they reach a fork in the road, wave the hat, they take that fork in the road, they go through the gate, I step forward and shut the gate. It took less than an hour. And I was amazed. And I thought, really, he is the perfect farmer. Really, he is the cow whisperer. And then I thought, no. He's a perfect teacher, because always I like thinking about teaching. He somehow understands how the cows think, and he can get them to do what he wants, not with a whole lot of shouting and noise, but by cleverly understanding and sort of getting them to do what he wants. And that night at dinner again, a barbecue at his father's place this time, I said, your son's amazing. He's the perfect farmer. And I wanted to try and explain how I thought that was almost the perfect teacher. But the dad stopped and said, oh, no, he's a really old guy. He's about 90, has arthritis. He's tough as nails. And he said, my son is an idiot. An hour, he said, look, I'll show you. And he walked over to his car, slowly walked to his car because he has really sore arthritic knees. He leaned in through the window of the ute and he went on the horn, honk, honk. And he paused and he said, yeah, wait and see. And I looked, and over the hill come his mob of cattle. And they walked up and they walked past us and they went into the mustering yards, and he leaned across and shut the gate. So, okay, you might be able to, I couldn't guess how he did it. He said, all I do is, every day when I feed them, I beep the horn, and that's how they know there's food, and I put the food in the muster yard. And I thought, wow, the perfect farmer. And I thought, wow, probably the perfect teacher. I've got to think about this. And I thought, hang on, I'm an academic. I thought his son was perfect, and I was wrong. Now I'm thinking he's perfect. I should be a bit more skeptical. Maybe there's And then I thought, he may well be the perfect farmer. I think he probably is the perfect farmer. But that's not the perfect teacher, because as a teacher, that's not the relationship I want to have with my students. My students are not cattle. It's not actually in the cow's interest to go into those yards. They'll get separated from their calves. The calves will have their testicles forcibly removed. The calves will be taken away and killed. Sometimes the parents get taken away and killed. It's in the farmer's interest they go into the yards. It's not in the cow's interests. The cows and the farmer don't really have the sort of relationship that I think a teacher should have to students. Now, I think in my own teaching, in fact, those of us who are teachers, I predict in all of our teaching, when we want students to do something, if I'm having a lecture and the students aren't turning up, I've only got 10% attendance. I know. I'll have an attendance mark. Honk, honk. The students have to turn up. I want them to do the labs. Honk, honk, 2 marks per lab. I need them to do this assignment. It's quite hard. They won't want to do it. It's difficult. Honk, 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 20%. I want them to form groups and write collaborative notes. They hate talking to each other, but they will. If honk, honk, I make it worth 15%. But if I make it worth 5, no, that's not enough. They can't hear it. In fact, I often used to grumble as a teacher to my wife as I'm planning each semester that I only had 100 marks to hand out. I had too many things for them to do for my budget of 100 marks to force them to doing it. I think for us, marks are that honk honk. And I decided in a sort of a bold and slightly scary step that the next course I taught would have no marks. Sure, at the end we have to give them a mark and a grade. We're a university, have to certify they know the stuff. But throughout the semester, to get them to do the things I wanted them to do, that I thought they should do, that were good for them, to attend the classes, to do the tutes, to do the labs, to do the readings, to do the assignments, to do the group work, to help each other, to take the collective notes, to clean up the classroom after the class, to all the things I wanted them to do, the assignments, the pracs, the exams, the tests, the study, the sleepless nights. I would still have all of that, but I wouldn't rely on marks. And that was a challenge. How could I then have the students do all these things without forcing them to do them? What would such a class look like? I want to tell you why I decided not to do that first, and then I'll talk about what the class looked like. I think there's 2 problems with marks. I mean, there's many problems with marks, but the 2 that disturbed me the most when I started thinking about it, eating on a yummy, tasty piece of calf, were at the barbecue. One is that the things that are worth measuring, the things we want to measure as a teacher, are actually very hard to measure. Einstein had a funny quote about that, essentially saying that not all the things we can measure are worth measuring, and not all the things worth measuring we can measure. He said it more succinctly, but I think it's true. Here's the story. Years and years ago, when I started teaching, I wanted to learn how to be a teacher, and I went to a primary school class, and I sat in and I observed the teaching in the class. In fact, I went to many classes. And one of the classes I was watching, I remember, was a maths class, and there was a question the teacher asked. The students had just been taught how to multiply, how to go through this algorithm. I just realised I like you guys much more than you guys. I can't explain it, I'm sorry, but sharpen up your act for the second half. Or the students were just taught the simple algorithm of multi-digit multiplication. So say multiplying a 3-digit number by a 3-digit number using pen and paper. And the teacher was then giving them an activity sheet where there were numerous examples they would go through practicing this skill over and over again. He just handed out the sheet and a boy asked a question. Now, I can't remember what the question was, I'm sorry. And someone asked me at rehearsals when I said, do you reckon I should do that anecdote? Someone said, yes, if you tell me what the question was. I can't remember what it was. But what I do remember is the boy asked this question and I was in a state of shock. I actually felt tingles in my body because this question was inspired. The question essentially noticed it was a forerunner to algebra. The student said, the boy asked a question to the teacher, couldn't we, or what happens if, or why does? It was some sort of question like that. And I'm thinking, I've got to write that down. That's the best way of teaching algebra. And I'm just thinking this is inspired. And I look to the teacher, and the whole class looks to the teacher, handing out these sheets. And the teacher says, with an angry look on his face, no. I want you to do the thing I've just taught you. There's 100 examples here. Can you please just go through repeating it and doing it over and over again? Somehow, what the student had done at that instant, I think, was really demonstrating learning and education at what we strive for as teachers. But the teacher themselves was focused on the measurement, on the marks, on the repetition. And in that world, there is not a lot of scope for not doing what the mark is for. So one is, it's very hard to measure things like that child's amazing, inspirational, but sadly forgotten question. 2, as another example of things that are hard to measure, educators tend to think of learning as happening in two different domains. Well, there are actually several domains, but the two major domains, one is called the affective domain. So this is changes to the learner where they change emotionally, changes to their beliefs, changes to their states of mind, changes involving emotion, changes involving attitudes. This is very hard to measure. Imagine a test where someone had to convince you they really believed something. I really believe that democracy is good. I really believe that we should have limits on the terms of presidents and we shouldn't have successive presidents. How could you test that? You could test what they'd say. You could test they remembered those words. But how can you test that belief? It's incredibly hard to test belief, but of course what we really want is belief and fundamental changes in people. But that's very hard to measure. In fact, a colleague and I have done a research project where we've examined the outcomes, the objectives of the top 50 universities around the world through over 1,000 of their courses. And we've looked at their objectives, their stated objectives for what they want the students to learn in each course. And less than 1% of the objectives are in this affective domain about belief, statement, or understanding. They're all in a much more simplistic domain. The second domain that teachers concentrate on and care about is called the cognitive domain. And that's probably the most familiar. That's this abstract thinking, changes in your abstract state. So that involves simply understanding or remembering things, or it involves more sophisticated things like perhaps being able to apply your knowledge to familiar but small toy examples, or perhaps even better, being able to analyse multiple points of views, synthesise multiple points of views together, and create even new points of views and new ideas. Now, this is much easier to measure, particularly down the bottom. The remembering, the recalling, the understanding, the limited application to small toy problems. But actually, the cognitive domain, what we really care about most as teachers, are these higher level things, the synthesis, creation, and analysis. And it seems to me that these simple things, noticing if someone knows how to spell something, or they know their rules of grammar, or they know how to multiply numbers with pen and paper, all these things are useful skills, sure, but you can see, it doesn't take much insight to notice these are exactly the things that computers are good for. If we really train our students to master low-level cognitive skills, we're training them for professions and lives that are eminently replaceable by computers. Really, the things we value as human and the things that make life worthwhile as human, and presumably the things that make their careers and their future lives, once the students have left us, worthwhile and important to them, are these high-level things, their ability to create, to synthesize, to say jokes, to entertain people, to bring beauty into the world, to write music, to find fantastic new ways of forming cues, or this is what computers can't do, but of course this is very hard to measure. Whereas it's very easy, videos and quizzes, to measure understanding and recall and limited application. The second problem so the first problem was it's hard to measure really the things we value. And the second thing is the act of measurement itself, and this is sort of obvious, changes behaviour, and often in corrosive ways, leading to non-optimal behaviour. Once we are measured, we act in a way to please the measurer. An example of this is when I was studying history and we were doing the Russian Revolution, I noticed this interesting link between the Russian Revolution and the French Revolution, and I wondered if it applied across multiple revolutions. And I put up my hand in class and said, "Sir, is it possible that this is a general characteristic of revolutions, that this sort of thing happens?" And I remember to this day what the teacher said. I was so interested. He looked at me and said, "That's not in the HSC syllabus. We're not going to spend time on that now." A former colleague of mine went to England and took her children with her and went to Cambridge, or in that area, to a hospital rather than the university. And her children, she told me so proudly, the schools over there are so much better than here. I know you don't like measuring anymore with your crazy cow ideas, but the schools over there record their performance, and I know how every one of them does in grammar and Latin and spelling and punctuation and trivial banal maths exercises, and it's completely ranked and measured and compared across all schools in England. And just from my bedroom in Australia, I can pick the best school in Cambridge to enrol my students in it, and I've just done it by email. How can you do that in your crazy qualitative wishy-washy world? And then a couple of years later, I was in touch with her at a conference and I was chatting. And I said, "Oh, how's it all going in Cambridge?" And she said, "Oh, it's terrible. One of my daughters is having a great time at school, but the other daughter had some problems. She had some learning difficulties. She had some socialization problems. She has various issues. And at school, we started being really concerned. She was losing motivation and heart at school, and her grades started dropping, and she just wasn't really understanding what was going on. We arranged an appointment with the headmaster to sort of talk about our concerns, and he was concerned too, and he's asked that she leave the school because it's bringing down the school's average, and they really like having these really high numbers. So she's had to go to another school and separated from her sister. Because we all know evolution tells us the measure is what we optimize the system for. And unless what we're measuring is what we really care about, then we have perverse behaviors. And I probably don't have to talk any more about that. You all know. So, what does this class look like? This crazy experiment we did with 400 students where there were no marks for doing anything. I think marks are a bit like sugar. If you add them to things, people eat it. If you take away the sugar, what's going to make people eat things? Well, there's 1,000 flavours that once your longing for sugar goes away, you start to notice in food and appreciate it. I sat down and brainstormed with the tutors that were helping me teach the course before the course started. How can we get the students to do things if we're not forcing them with marks? And we came up with a list of about 20, slightly 18 things. Since then, we've grown the list. It's now more than 40. But let me tell you just some of the things in the list to give you an idea of what the class looked like. People should do things, we decided, because they were interested in them. We also decided, after sort of testing these ideas, that not every student was motivated by all these things. But as long as we had a big smorgasbord of motivators sitting out there, every student hopefully was motivated by at least a couple of them. So many students are interested in doing things that are interesting. They're motivated by having fun, and they're motivated by pleasure. Some students are motivated by curiosity or the sheer joy of learning. And you'll know that joy of learning if you've ever had a child and watched them painfully learn to walk or talk. How can they keep doing that, falling over and banging their head over and over and over again on the stairs when really, don't they just give up? But no, they want to walk. And I remember when my daughters could walk, the smiles on their faces and the joy when they... So we do have this yearning for learning. But also, we like helping each other. We like being part of a community. Some people like creating things. Some people like solving problems. Some people like doing puzzles. Some people like competing and beating others. Some people like challenging themselves, setting targets and working against them. A lot of people like this sense of collaborative learning. And I don't know about you, but my own days at uni, the best memories I have were in the lab where we're joking and laughing and helping each other. Perhaps the uni wouldn't really like it because we should all be working solo on our assignments, but people would be helping people who were stuck on things and explaining difficult concepts. It was a really fun time and we felt part of a common cause. Collaboration is a great thing. Going through shared adversity is a great thing. There's a million things, but basically what it meant was to run the course, our classroom had to be a pleasurable place to be in because we weren't forcing the students to be there. They only came if they wanted to be there. And the class was packed. And can I say, from that year on, our classes now are normally full not only of our own students, but many bring their girlfriends or former students turn up. It's very rare that we're ever teaching a class when if I say, who's actually a student in this class? There's a whole lot of illegal learners there, which I hope the government never find out about. You can't learn illegally, that's un-Australian. So the classrooms are pleasant and happy, sure. How do I know it works? It sounds a bit wishy-washy. I can't really know how it works. There's no easy measure, the very dilemma that I talked about before, but I can give you some clues that suggest to me that it's working. I know in my heart I believe it's working. Clues are, our school has gone from being quite a good computer science school to being the best and most desirable computer science school in Australia. We win national programming competitions. We've just today found we won the ACM, the biggest worldwide competition in programming. We've just won the Australian South Pacific finals again. We win robotics competitions, we win cybersecurity competitions. In fact, we come every year first, second and third, beating all other universities in all places every year, except the first year when we only put in one team. As well, internationally, we do well. Now, of course, there's many factors behind that. I'm not saying this is the only factor, but it can't be that we're harming the students by doing this because they're doing really well. We're a desirable choice for employers. Our students are highly sought after by industry. And the best story is the one that moved me the most was the very first year I did it, and I was so frightened not knowing if it would work or not. The next semester, I was walking across, just before semester, I was walking across a quadrangle, and two students rang up, Richard, 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 Richard. They were all excited. I said, what? And they said, guess where we've been? And I said, where? And they said, we've been in America. Microsoft flew us to Redmond. We did an internship. And I said, wow. And they said, yeah, they've never taken first years before as an internship. But when we went to the interview, all the things they asked us to do and show we could do because we'd done them in the course. They didn't really care about the facts we could remember or the things we knew. They gave us puzzles to solve. They wanted to know how we operated in groups. They wanted to see how we could create and do new things, how we were self-motivated. And that was all the stuff we'd done in the course. We just thought the course was fun. But actually, it gave us this incredible experience. And I said, guys, come with me. I'm just about to start the next year. Come along and tell the students that so that they don't have to believe me. So I love that. Now, there's no evidence that it works, but I take that. And there's no incontrovertible evidence that it works, but I love the experience. The students love doing it. It's a wonderful thing. I really do enjoy. I would love to invite you to any of our classes if you'd like to attend them. They're always open. So, in conclusion, the Grinch hated Christmas and tried to stop it by stealing everyone's presents. And he thought till his puzzler was sore. Then the Grinch thought of something that he hadn't before. Maybe Christmas, he thought, doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas, perhaps, means a little bit more. And I think us teachers, we should think and think until our puzzlers are sore. Because maybe education doesn't come from a score. Maybe education, just maybe, means a little bit more. Thank you.